Here at the Our Time to Rise podcast, we pick topics that we think are going to be helpful to you, the listener. And today we are doing a little bit of a roundup of pain points for women in midlife. We are talking about things that we have felt, the two of us have felt, that we have had our friends articulate to us, or we have heard from you that are pain points to this specific stage of life. And we're going to try a new format because why not? So what we're going to do as we talk through these pain points is one of us is going to say an I statement that we have either said ourselves or we've heard other people say. And the other is going to respond with some scripture that can speak hope and life into that pain. And then we're going to talk about how we can reframe and relook at that particular issue in our lives right now. So know that as we are going through this episode, talking about changing bodies, changing lives, changing circumstances, that it all bubbles up from what we hear from you. And our intent is absolutely to be encouraging, to let you know that you are not alone, that other women are feeling these things, and to know that God cares about you right now, where you are in these circumstances, and He has something to say about them. So that's what we're going to do. It's going to be a little bit of call and response and a little bit of thoughtful conversation. And we are so glad that you pushed play.
Okay. So we're going to start by saying, who am I if, and fill in the blank, because this really is a fill in the blank. All of us have individual circumstances where we are battling different dragons, and yet we're going to call some of those out today. Ones, like Alex said, that we've encountered, other people have encountered around us. We've heard you talk about as you message us and tell us. So who am I if, fill in the blank. So let's start today with this one. Alex, who am I if I don't have kids anymore at home to raise?
Ecclesiastes 3, verses 1 through 5 says, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing." Verse 11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end."
It is so interesting because I think as people who are raising children for 25, basically a quarter of a century, who have kids in their house for a quarter of a century. It is such a shift and a change when they leave the house. You don't ever stop becoming a parent, but it is a certain kind of loss that is significant and marks a transition to another season of life, which is a change. And what I love about that verse is it says there's a time for everything. That was the time for that. And now this is the time for something else. And that feels really hopeful to me because as I look at this idea and as we kind of look at the reframe that not having kids at home gives me and others an opportunity to pursue things I never could before. It gives me a chance to maybe run professionally in a way that I haven't before because I'm not looking at 4 other busy schedules and needing to be home for those conversations and dinners. And now granted, Eric still wants me home, but It also gives Eric and I a chance to rebirth some things in our relationship that we haven't had the time or space to do. So as I look at this, there's a season, there's a time for everything. Well, the time is for some new things, but in the midst of that, you have to let go of the time that was past. And that's hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's a time for grief too in that, and to allow ourselves to experience it all, to say that I loved well, and I still love well. My kids aren't dead or gone. I mean, maybe they're gone, but I still love them. And there's a time to grieve that season being over.
Yeah.
Okay, here's another one. Who am I if I don't recognize myself in the mirror?
2 Corinthians 4:16. Therefore, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. Isaiah 46:4. I will be your God throughout your lifetime. Until your hair is white with age, I made you, and I will care for you. I will carry you along and save you. And 1 Peter 3:4. Make yourselves beautiful on the inside, in your hearts, with the enduring quality of a gentle, peaceful spirit. This type of beauty is very precious in God's eyes.
I will say this has been a place that has surprised me in the struggle. I have honestly been surprised at my own response of my aging and my vanity. I really have. I am grateful for a body that works. And I probably am overcompensating by working out because that is something I can control when I might not be able to control all the changes happening. But I am working at accepting that I am a different person than I was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. There are some good things about that. I'm wiser for sure. But this idea that I am never going to go back to what I was, I'm really having to work at accepting it. And I was talking with my friend Hope, who is quite a bit younger than me, the other day about my waistline. And she said, so it sounds like your body is acting like a body. I was like, oh, yeah. Yeah. I just have internalized some cultural expectations that I hadn't realized until now when I'm being faced with them. So I am confessing here to everyone that I'm struggling. And I had another friend yesterday who told me, because we were talking about this, she said, I'm working really hard that when I look in the mirror, I smile because I have a beautiful face. It doesn't look like it did 10 years ago, but it can either smile or not. And so that's my small challenge to myself, is to smile when I look at myself in the mirror instead of that initial, oh my word, what is happening? What is happening here?
Yeah.
I was going to say also that last verse that you read, that the focus on the interior life and the interior beauty. I mean, that's the gift of aging too, is that we can recognize that God sees our heart and that's what he cares about. And because we can't control some of those external changes, it allows us to release control of that. It gives us that opportunity too, and to really focus on what matters.
And it is interesting, isn't it? It's a daily practice. It's the small daily practices that actually do make a difference. Because if we're looking at, how do we reframe? Well, reframing begins with gratitude. It begins with those statements of, God, thank you that you are allowing me to breathe today. There's so much that we can focus on that is changing or not good in this season of life, whether it's this topic or another one. And yet when we begin with gratitude, in my own life, I see that it changes everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In this area, this has been a challenge. Usually I can reframe pretty quickly. And this has been a challenge.
What makes it different, do you think?
Than other things? I think it's because it's new. It's a new challenge for me. I mean, other things that I have to kind of work at, money, for example, I've always kind of struggled with that. So I can be grateful for how God has provided for me. I know that muscle, that I've worked that muscle, but I haven't worked this muscle, this size 2 beauty queen who didn't, who ate Snickers bars as much as she wanted to. All of a sudden, in her late 40s, things changed. And I recognize that is not everybody's story, but it is mine. And so that is new for me. And I think probably for all of us, when we're facing a challenge that is new, that may be a more familiar challenge to somebody else, but it's new for us, that's where the rub hits. And this is my new one. And I will also say it's very vain. I get it.
Yeah.
I'm not proud of it.
That is interesting. That's interesting because when I think of it in that light, that's true. Like, I'm not struggling with that issue as much, but that's because I've never been able to lean on it. It's not something I've ever been able to take identity in because I've always struggled. So that's interesting. That's really interesting. Okay. Who am I if I can't move physically like I used to?
Romans 12:1. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Philippians 1:20 says, I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage, so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death.
Oh, wow. Sufficient courage. I love that line. That I will have sufficient courage. And I think that is so true when it comes to this area of physical limitations. I mean, I've had my own struggle with this since a surgery that went awry, and I'm now battling some severe limitations in movement. And my friends who have cancer, they are battling some severe limitations at the moment. And that has to do with, everything from colostomy bags to, not having energy after radiation and chemo and just be bedridden. They are bedridden so much of the time because they literally don't have the energy to move. So I think about, gosh, we certainly need courage. And it's so hard when we look at this area of physical limitations, because when you don't feel well or you hurt, there's a specific challenge in that. Because when you don't feel well physically, it's hard to be well emotionally. It's hard to get up and face the day well when your body is fighting you in some way. And you almost feel like your body has betrayed you. And that's hard. I've heard a lot of people talk about the betrayal they feel from their body, which is so interesting. And I think about how important it is. And we're going to keep going back to this in this episode because we have to, because it's a discipline and it's hard. But the gratitude, I mean, I look at my own struggle in the last 2 years, and I cannot believe the amount of compassion it's grown in me for other people who have physical limitations. Like, it is night and day. And I am truly grateful for that. I mean, I'm truly grateful that I come at life now with a different lens. And it's truly a change forever lens. And I'm thankful for that. I am learning about the joy and acceptance that comes. Actually, I'm learning about the joy and connection that comes from allowing others to help me. This is not something I'm very good at. I really am not. I like being independent. I like being able to do everything on my own. And this is new for me. Talk about something new. This is new for me to ask for help. And so that is hard. And my son, Dawson, actually, one day, all summer, he spent working in North Carolina at this beautiful ministry called Reality. And they have hundreds of people with disabilities that are in this program. It's basically after kids graduate from high school. So it can run their whole lifetime. But they have all these programs and work, ways for them to engage in work, and they cook and they sell goods and they have bands and they sing. I mean, it's incredible. And he was working there all summer, and he was talking to me one day on a particularly hard day for me. And he said, "Mom, I've just learned this summer about the way God created us is to be in relationship and to be dependent on each other. And in our culture, we have done the opposite. We have gone our own way and we walk our own way." And he said, that's actually not the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God, he's like, so many of these people I work with, they literally rely on another person every day so they can live, to meet their needs, so they can get up and do what they need to do and be fed or whatever. And he said, and they are so happy and safe in this interdependent relationship and in this connectedness that they have. And he said, I've never experienced anything like it. And he said, and I think you're getting a taste of it. And I just bawled. I mean, I could just cry out.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a reframe. That is a reframe. And what I also hear you saying is you come to this particular pain point with gratitude that things aren't worse, gratitude that you can do what you can do. But it also produces gratitude for not just for the things you have, but also for the things that are causing the actual pain. Because in God, all things are joy, right? Like if we count all things joy, that even our pain points can bring us joy if they bring us closer to Him and closer to each other, because we are meant to have vertical and horizontal relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. It's so powerful when we reframe and then when other people help us reframe. And that was a moment, gosh, where your child comes back and speaks into your heart. That's something.
Yeah. Okay. Who am I if I feel directionless?
Psalm 32:8. I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my loving eye on you. Isaiah 30:21. Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. In Isaiah 43:19, for I am about to do something new. See, I have already begun. Do you not see it? I will make a pathway through the wilderness. I will create rivers in the dry wasteland.
I think for a lot of women who feel this directionless, it is a little bit of the shifting of responsibilities, like we talked about earlier with kids leaving, or other relationships changing. And I think there is a disorienting feeling that I have felt, especially this summer. This summer has felt like a disorienting time in my life because so many things are changing that I don't know what to focus on. Like I don't know which thing is my thing to pay attention to right now, because it feels like, well, that changed and that changed. And then it's almost like I'm spinning in circles as I'm trying to look at all these different things that are around me. And what I'm trying to do in my reframe is I'm trying to be patient with myself and not put this pressure of, I must know right now what to do in this particular situation, but to hold that tension of, wow, whatever this is, this one thing is really changing a lot. And I have to adjust to it, and I need to give myself time. And God is not in a hurry. I am, because I'm uncomfortable. So I want the discomfort to end quickly of this disorientation. But to be patient and to recognize that there are going to be times when my assignments in life are really clear and direct. And I've experienced those before. And that as things shift and I'm working on getting my footing, I can give myself time to do that. And that God is with me in all of that, even if I'm not feeling productive or I'm not feeling really purposeful in something, that He is still with me and that has not changed. And that I can operate a little bit more depending on His timeline than my own comfort's timeline.
It's a key phrase right there, I think. I was just listening to an interview between Adam Grant and Andy Stanley, two of my favorites. Adam Grant was on the Andy Stanley Leadership Podcast, and I was listening to him, and he basically was talking about how much resistance we have to discomfort. And he was actually speaking of it in terms of character, because a lot of his book Hidden Potential is on character and how character is, it really just does so much in our lives. It reveals our potential ultimately. But one of the things he talked about was that leaning into discomfort is a character issue. And I was like, whoa, that is a reframe for me. That was a new idea that I probably had read it in the book, because I have read the book, but it didn't stick. And when he said it, I was like, whoa, if I think about discomfort as building character, that really changes it for me. Like I go, okay, I want to build character. So the more I lean into discomfort, the more character I'm actually building in myself. And I can get behind that.
Because as people of faith, when we get uncomfortable, when we lean into that discomfort, we are relying on God more. And if we are relying on Him more, He is going to change us for the better. And to not be afraid of it.
Yeah.
Okay, Krista, you have one that we hear often from our listeners.
Who am I if my kids aren't thriving?
Psalm 28:2. I'm letting you know what I need, calling out for help, and lifting my arms toward your inner sanctuary. Philippians 4 verses 6 and 7 say, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Boy, we feel this pain collectively, don't we, as parents, that we know even if our kids are doing okay, if our friends' kids are struggling, we feel for them and with them, because we know a parent's love for kids.
And we've all experienced pain in our journey of why there have been times where our own kids have not been thriving. I mean, I don't know any mom who hasn't had a season where their child is not thriving. And I think there's a particular pain when your adult kids aren't thriving that I do want to recognize, and that we often hear from people around us. And it's hard to let go. It is hard to, one of the things I talk a lot, in fact, Eric and I were just talking about this last night, that it goes back to Kelly Flanagan, the therapist. You can resist what's happening, or you can attach to a narrative that isn't coming true, or you can open your arms and you can invite God into what is. And we were talking about it in light of a different situation that he's experiencing, but it applies so well to this one, because I think when we open our hands, it does something in us. Bob Goff in Love Does, he writes about how, as a lawyer, he often tells people when they go to the witness stand to sit with their palms up, because it's impossible to get, or he said it changes their posture when they sit with their hands up, and it makes them more open and honest and relaxed. And I thought that's so fascinating. But I think it's also true when it comes to this, that when we literally, and I would encourage, like, you listeners who are struggling with one of your kids right now, literally open your hands and put your palms up physically and open up and let go of the things you can't control, because that's where we get stuck, is when we're trying to control. And it's hard. And I think we feel a certain failure. I mean, we're looking at, who am I if my kids aren't driving? That who am I question is really big, because we tend to associate our identity with their identity. And if they're not thriving, we're not thriving. And so it gets really kind of enmeshed in there.
Right. And what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
If they're not thriving. Yeah.
Which is also called codependency. So talk about that, Alex.
Well, I think this separation, it's hard. When kids grow up, they separate. Like, that's the teenage developmental stage of separation. But for parents, sometimes we don't want the separation, right? Like, we want the holding on to. And even just in the last few weeks, having a new college freshman again, like, catching myself. How many times do I text her? How often do I reach out to her? Like, letting that separation happen. And I don't think we have to cut our kids off cold turkey when they leave for college. I don't want people to hear that. But I do have to check my own heart in what is my motive in sending this text right now. What is my motive? And we just did an exercise in fasting at work. And the thing I chose to fast had to do with this, like, letting go a little bit of a pattern of behavior that wasn't serving me, and it really wasn't serving anyone. So we're in this with you as we constantly reframe, not just once, but every day, multiple times a day.
Well, and I think I want to say to the woman who is in a place where is really questioning her own identity because of what's happening with her kids, that, God is not done with them, and to hold on to that hope. And sometimes we need our friends to have that. I mean, I have a particular friend, and we tell each other all the time, I'm holding out hope and confidence for this child for you when you can't. And maybe you need to find that friend who can believe for your child on your behalf right now. Because it's true. Like, there have been times with, especially a couple of different friends, where I'm like, I know they're going to come through this. I know they are, because I know this child, and I know God has good plans for this child. But that mom at that moment was not believing that. And so, and I've had people do that for me. And so I think that is such a beautiful way as friends we can fill in each other's gaps in those really hard moments.
Who am I if I am now the caretaker for those who used to care for me?
Isaiah 40:29-31. He gives power to the weak and strength to the powerless. Even youths will become weak and tired, and young men will fail in exhaustion. But those who trust in the Lord will find new strength. They will soar high on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not faint.
Mm.
Psalm 23:4. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. And then I also wanted to read this beautiful quote by Teresa of Avila. Christ has no body now but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes through which he looks compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands through which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands. Yours are the feet. Yours are the eyes. You are the body. Christ has no body now on earth but yours.
Hmm. Yeah. Shout out to the sandwich generation, right? And so many of us. So, I mean, this is a topic of conversation that really, in my world, comes up super often with my friends and just our extended family. It is something kind of like, I would say, maybe not as vain as my own surprise at my pain, this is a new challenge for many of us. Like with parenting, maybe we've had parenting challenges for 20 years. But for caring for the generation above us, whether it's our parents or our in-laws or aunts and uncles, that this is new. And so it feels like uncharted waters, and it feels unsettling. Like, I don't know, where is the instruction book on this? And we know that God calls us to honor those that have come before us, our parents and our elders. So we want to do that in a way, but in the practical, how day to day, it can be so hard.
How do
So
you think it impacts your identity? Because if we're looking at like, who am I what does it do to identity that makes it so hard?
Well, I'm thinking of one person right now, a conversation I had, and she was talking about her parents, and she, got emotional, and she's like, I just realized I can't depend on them anymore. And we are now the grown-ups. I mean, we say that sometimes on the podcast, but it's because we now are the ones who have the capacity, whether it's energy or time or understanding technology, whatever it is, we are the ones that have to make the decisions. And I just turned 50. Like, for so much of our lives, we've been able to depend on the people above us to kind of have that covering. And now, and for many of my friends too, parents are gone completely. And so that level of responsibility, I think it's a new mantle that has been passed. And sometimes it's a really gradual passing, which can feel confusing too. Like, do I take this on? Do I take this on? Whose responsibility is this? While I'm still trying to honor the people ahead of me that have gone before me, who have done it for so long, at what point do I take over X responsibility, whatever that might be?
Well, I also think that there's just, even this week, I was having a conversation with a friend who, was trying to also have some boundaries around her own immediate family and her parent situation, and was just feeling like, am I a bad person? Because I'm still trying to, I'm trying to care well for my parents, but I'm also trying to hold some boundaries there so that I have some health in my own family. But does that make me a bad person? I think there's some really tough questions around how to care, how much to care, when it starts impacting your personal life, and that's okay, but then how much is too much? It's really layered.
It is. And especially when it's your own parents, the
Mm-hmm.
people who have cared for you. I mean, we wouldn't be here if it weren't for them. And then maybe you have a tricky relationship with your parents. Maybe, there's just all kinds of dynamics that can play into that. But I really ache for all of us as we maneuver through this. And it's not all bad. Like, it's also it's so beautiful too. And our friend Wendy, she and I had a real heart to heart one time when she was here in town visiting, and we were talking about caring for the generation above us. And she said, it is my joy. And I really honestly feel like it is her joy. And so when I think of somebody that, like, I want to be more like Wendy. But
Oh, shout out Wendy Trigstead.
yeah, shout out. So and it is my joy. And I think for so many of us, it is. And there is just the, like, nuts and bolts of it. Like, how many times a day do you call and check in on someone? And just those things.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And do
Yeah.
you offer for them to live with you? Do you help them find another situation? I mean, it's just hard. And yet they have sacrificed so much for us. And those are hard, difficult questions. And there's no easy answers because, like you said, every relationship is different. And so I think my encouragement to people would be go so prayerfully. Just walk prayerfully. And, one of the things spiritual directors talk a lot about, and I think this applies to all of these categories, is look for arrows, not answers. And so, we often look for answers. We're like, give me the answer. I want the answer. But, and I wish I knew the original person who came up with this. I'd give them credit. But the idea is there's never answers, but there are arrows. And so start looking for those arrows that are pointing in a certain way. And I think that goes along with a lot of the third way thinking that you and I talk a lot about, that it's not these polarized, it's either this or this, but there's often a third way that feels good to everybody. And so, those are just some helpful tools for people who are in that spot. Okay. Who am I if I don't feel relevant anymore in my area of expertise?
Isaiah 46:4. Even to your old age, I will be the same. And even to your graying years, I will bear you. I have done it, and I will carry you. And I will bear you, and I will deliver you. So this is the second time we're reading this verse, just a different translation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really applies. I think a lot about, well, this one was spurred on by a college friend, and she is a real mover and shaker. I mean, a real mover and shaker. And she said, I used to walk in a room. She, lives in a very big city, and there's a lot going on, and she's been kind of one of the people in the city that's been on the scene. And she said, I used to walk in a room and feel like people wanted to talk to me, and I was really relevant, and I was really, valuable in that community. And she said, suddenly I walk into the room and I no longer feel relevant. I feel old. I feel like people don't really want to talk to me. I feel invisible. And I was like, whoa, that is really hard. And I think something that a lot of people feel as they get older, that the limelight is for the young. It is not for the growing old. And it really made me think of Arthur Brooks, his books From Strength to Strength, which we've talked about before. But I do think for anyone who has not read that book, it is so helpful in regards to this particular subject in particular, because, he really starts the book with two contrasting famous people. One is Darwin, Charles Darwin, and one is Johann Bach. and Sebastian Bach. So there's a lot of Bachs, but because he had children who were famous too. But he talks about these two men, Darwin, who dies miserable and feeling like a failure, and Bach, who dies happy and content and fulfilled from this life of abundance. And why? He really goes into what is the difference between these two. What did they do differently? And the conclusion is that in the back half of their life, Bach, unlike Darwin, he didn't despair, that he actually took his fluid intelligence curve, so to speak, which is when we're building in our first half of life, and he jumped with both feet into his crystallized intelligence curve, which is in the back half of life. And that's like where wisdom comes. That's where experience plays in. So he harnesses all this, and he actually starts giving and coaching and teaching the next generation, and kind of takes on that and becomes very happy. And so I just think it's so interesting to look at those two characters in particular, when it just helps me to kind of have a handhold on what do we do with that? What do we do when we walk into a room and feel invisible? Where do we go from there? Mm-hmm. And I want to be more like Bach, not Darwin.
Yeah. It is, it's tough. It's this whole cultural aging thing. And people do say that they start to feel invisible. And I think it might feel more common for women than for men. And that gets to some of our cultural expectations or acceptance of men aging versus women aging. But that book has been so helpful to me to recognize there are good things. And he says, Arthur Brooks says, devote the back half of your life to serving others with your wisdom. Get old sharing the things you believe are most important. Excellence is always its own reward, and this is how you can be most excellent as you age. And we have seen people fight that and try to stay relevant, and he talks about that in the book. And it's uncomfortable, but it's also exhausting. And how do we want to spend our lives? God does have a plan for us. He does have purposes for us. And it gets back to the season. What is our season right now? And how does it align? What is the arrow? See, it's all coming together. What is the arrow I am to follow that will help point me in a direction, even if I don't have that next step? And I am speaking to myself right now, everyone. So it's good. It's really good. Okay, last one. And again, this is from people that we love so much. Who am I if my marriage has fallen apart?
Isaiah 54, 5-6. For your maker is your husband. The Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope.
Yeah, I think that's our message for our sisters who are in this position, who are saying this I statement, is your story is not over. Mm-hmm. And we know that it could be very painful right now, very discouraging, very disorienting of all of the investment that has been put into a relationship and a life together. And unfortunately, this season of life, it isn't uncommon for marriages to end. And it does not mean that God is not with you, that he does not love you, that you are less precious to him. You are just as precious as you have ever been.
Yeah. I often hear from actively walking with some people who are experiencing divorce. And I hear this theme of I am rejected. I am not worthy of love. No one will ever want me. I'm unwanted. And both now and in the future. And I think what I want you to hear is that is not true, that you are clothed in strength and dignity, and that God will raise you up. There is a rising that will happen. It's happening even in the grief and the pain. But if you look to him as your source of strength and courage, that you will rise out of these ashes. And God does have a future for you that is good. And this is a huge dragon that you're fighting, but you will get through it.
Well, we are going to end the episode with this verse. It's John 14:17. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives, do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid.